You know, I'm really excited for all these fighting games coming out, like Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, and now Mortal Kombat 12. I really wish these developers would take a chance on an older fighting game series. Like, why not do a Bleach fighting game, or a new Marvel fighting game, or a Darkstalkers, something like that? I just wish they weren't so afraid of taking these chances back to doing something they haven't done in a while. Hell, I would even take a fighting game series of an IP that we haven't got in a while, but we haven't got that fighting game series in a while. Like, I don't get it. I just don't understand it. Wait, why did my TV just turn on? And why did it become an older model TV from the earlier 2000s? Oh, is this like a Tenkaichi remaster or something? You know what? I'll take it. How's it going, everybody? Ragnaroth here. So, we got some pretty shocking news a couple days ago, and that was that there is going to be, a couple days ago at the time of this recording, and that was that there's going to be a new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi fighting game. And this just kind of came out of nowhere, because as far as I know, there was no rumors or leaks or anything regarding this. So, because that's how it is most of the days, especially with fighting games. They're usually always rumored or leaked ahead of time. But this came out was a huge shock, and it's definitely a pleasant surprise. Now, admittedly, I don't really think Dragon Ball is a series that really needs that many more fighting games right now. I think we are pretty well fed on that. However, we haven't really had a brand new one in a good some time. We've really just been getting a lot of DLC with Fighterz and Xenoverse 2, and we've been getting other Dragon Ball games like Kakarot and Breakers as well. So it is nice to actually get a new fighting game, and the Budokai Tenkaichi games were great. I grew up on them back in the day. I think a lot of us did. They're just a lot of good memories of those games, and it's nice to see them bringing it back. Now, admittedly, Spike did make some games after that. The Raging Blast games, Ultimate Tenkaichi, and Connect. It seems like they're mainly just kind of focusing on the original Budokai Tenkaichi, because that's what it seemed like was the most successful, so more marketable. I don't know if it's going to be called Tenkaichi 4, honestly. I think it's going to be called something else, but we're just calling it Tenkaichi 4 for now, at least. So, of course, every new fighting game, at least that I'm interested in, I got to do a top 10 characters, or something like that, for characters I'd like to see in the game. And for Dragon Ball, it's pretty easy, maybe too easy, just because there's too many options to make some lists. Now, that's the other thing I want to mention. With this kind of game, there are going to be a few top 10 lists. There's going to be characters I'd like to see return from Tenkaichi 3, characters I'd like to see added that were around back then, but still didn't quite make it in Tenkaichi 3, or maybe they were in other Spike games. And of course, then the big elephant in the room that wasn't around back then, Dragon Ball Super characters that I'd like to see. And we know we're at least going to get something like that, considering we saw Goku go Super Saiyan Blue in the teaser. So, let's get started. And yeah, I should say that I'm under the opinion that I don't think the whole roster from Tenkaichi 3 is going to come back. If it does, I'll be pleasantly surprised. That'll be awesome. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't think it's happening. So that's why I'm making this list. And I figured I might as well start with a safer, less exciting list first. So let's get started. Number 10. What you could do. So up first is Pikkon. Pikkon is always a character I really liked in Dragon Ball Z that I feel like never really got enough love. Admittedly, it's partially because I found out he was a filler character. He was never canon or anything like that. But I always liked him. I know he was always compared to Piccolo. I always kind of liked him more than Piccolo. Now, in regards to him in Tenkaichi, his moveset was okay. I mean, it wasn't my favorite that he's ever had, if I'm being honest. I think the Budokai games and Xenoverse games. I think he was in Xenoverse 2, right? Yeah, he was in Xenoverse 2. Just did a better job as a whole. Very disappointing he didn't make it into Fighterz. I think he would have been really good in Fighterz. That's another reason he's on this list, because I feel like I didn't really get my fill of him. And I always like seeing him in a game. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to make it, at least not the base roster. Pikkon is a character that doesn't really seem to ever make a first game. I know it's not a first game, but a first game in a while in a case like this, or like a sequel. Or he's a DLC character, something like that. He doesn't make the base roster. Only time he ever was Shin Budokai, and that's partially because the gimmick of that game was mainly focusing on the Fusion Reborn kind of story. And I think they wanted to have at least one or two characters that have never been playable in a Budokai game, let alone a Dragon Ball Z game, period. And that was Janemba in a way, because Janemba at the time was never in a Budokai game, and Pikkon, who was basically never playable, period, who was in that movie. So I think that's the only exception. But yeah, hopefully Pikkon makes it. He's always a cool character. Hopefully his moveset's a little... hopefully they do it a little better in Tenkaichi, assuming he's in the game. I guess he's maybe just a harder character doing this type of game just because he has more up-close moves.
Number 9. Ow to my power!
So I know this is going to be a weird one for some folks, but I always was fascinated with the idea of playing as King Cold. I was always curious what he could do exactly. We didn't really get to see him do much, and I'm sure he was actually strong. It's just that he was just kind of outclassed when we actually got to see him fight with Trunks. And Tenkaichi 3 kind of answered that question. I was really happy to see they actually made King Cold a playable character. I remember he was one of the first characters they announced they added. And I think they did okay. They actually had a neat idea where you know how King Cold kind of took Trunks' sword very briefly? Well, they actually made the sword part of his moveset. And they gave him a stronger death beam than most of Frieza's forms, a full power death beam, if you will. And then they had a unique ultimate where him and this Frieza just tag teams you and slashes you with a sword and gives you a nice blast to the face. I thought that was cool. I'd like to see them take this a step further, and it would be awesome. I know this definitely isn't going to happen. They give King Cold maybe a what-if form or something like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dragon Ball Multiverse, but it's kind of this very well-done manga-style story where they take characters from other different universes, and I think there's one where basically the Cold family wins and rules the universe. And King Cold is really strong. He actually gets later forms. He gets a final form, and he even gets a fifth form style like Cooler has. It's kind of a mix of sort of third form Frieza and fifth form Cooler, which I thought it looked awesome. It was super sick. I'd love to see them do something like this. I know it never happened, though, and I will settle for the normal King Cold that we get. Do I think he has a chance? Absolutely not. He's definitely not coming back, at least not base roster. But hey, I don't know. Again, if they do add all the characters to Tenkaichi 3, he's going to be in, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Number 8.
You too will become one of my loyal and obedient slaves, Vegeta. After all this time, it's finally mine. I possess the strongest body in the universe.
So Baby Vegeta, I think Baby Vegeta is actually one of the best Dragon Ball villains. I think he's cool, I think he's entertaining, and I think his motives are a little refreshing than a lot of other characters. So I always love seeing him in games. He was a blast to play as in Xenoverse 2, and even more so Fighterz. I wasn't admittedly super crazy about his moveset in the Tenkaichi games, though. It was just, I don't know, it was a little plain, and I wasn't really even that good with him, to be honest. But hey, that's a reason we can bring him back and improve upon that. It was really cool, though, that you actually got to be his earlier Baby Vegeta forms. That was really cool. I mean, yeah, their movesets were pretty generic. But even still, it would be nice to see them come back as well. But I'm mainly just focusing on, I guess, what we call as Super Baby 2, I believe it's called. But ideally, we would get all those forms, including Great Ape as well.
First the North Galaxy, then the South Galaxy, then the entire universe will belong to the Topples. Super Baby 2! Win!
Number 7.
No one can defy the Great Father.
So I normally wouldn't have Deborah so high on this list, but he has really been getting mistreated lately in terms of making it in rosters. Like, he wasn't in the first Xenoverse. He was in Xenoverse 2, but he was a DLC character, and he never made it into Fighterz. I don't understand why. I kind of always thought Deborah was at least somewhat of a priority, because he was at least a major part of the earlier part of the Buu saga. And he always has a really cool moveset. I think he's the coolest henchman character in all the mainline Z games. I'd much rather see him in a game than like Nappa or the Ginyu Force, at least in my opinion. I know he's not as iconic, I just like him more. So that's a little why he's a little higher on this list. Honestly, his Tenkaichi moveset wasn't anything amazing, but again, he was one of the few characters that actually had a sword. And he could use the spear as well. I think his Raging Blast 2 moveset, from what I remember, was a lot better. And that's probably more of the inspiration they should use, assuming he makes it in this game. I think his chances are okay. It just depends on what they prioritize. If they're having a nice representation of Z, GT, and Super, it might be kind of not likely, because I think that's kind of the reason why he didn't make it in the Xenoverse for a bit, because they were prioritizing GT, and now we got Super into the mix. But it really depends on what they're focusing on. I think he's an okay shot, though.
Number 6.
Do you really think you can stand up to me?
So Tenkaichi is the series that actually really made me fall in love with Turles. I remember when I saw Trade My Movie when I was a kid. I thought he was cool, just not that memorable. But then kind of seeing him again in Tenkaichi 2 really made me think he was cool. I think it was just his moveset, his style, his voice, his personality. He just seemed really cool to me. I remember him just being really good with him in those games. I don't know if he was actually considered good. I just remember being good with him. I don't know what it was. And I also didn't really get him in Fighterz. I got him in Xenoverse 2. He was in the base roster of that. And I got him in Raging Blast 2. You know, that was cool. And it was neat. He actually had kind of a somewhat prominent role in the Xenoverse 2 story. For his chances in this game, I really don't know. He's usually, once again, he never really makes it in the first entry of a game, and he usually, or not the base roster. So I think he's at most going to be DLC. But again, I think after kind of Broly, Cooler, and Janemba, he's usually the movie villain, maybe the next in line, usually, I think at least. Or him or Bojack, I feel like. One of the space pirates, basically.
Number 5.
If you want to fight that much, I'll be your opponent.
So number 5 is Super Saiyan Future Gohan. Now the reason I say Super Saiyan Future Gohan, it's not that I don't want him to have the base form. It just, you know, with Tenkaichi, each form has kind of their own moveset, and I'm assuming that'll kind of be the case here as well. And honestly, I never really played his base form Gohan that much. I think I would just play as him just so I can start the match base form and just be able to power up. But his moveset was very boring and generic. The fun didn't really start until he went Super Saiyan. Not to mention, I love his Super Saiyan hairstyle. And I love Future Gohan. He's arguably my favorite version of Gohan. I think he's actually a lot of people's favorite version of Gohan. And it's funny he doesn't get that much love, because he seems very popular. I think it's just because he's just from sort of a side story or side note in the Cell Saga, even though he actually does have sort of an important role in shaping who Trunks is. Now, in terms of do I think he's going to make it, you know, once again, he's one of those characters that he makes it, he just can never make it in a first game or be base roster. The only time he really ever did was a horrible example. It was Dragon Ball Sagas, and the only reason he did was because that focused only on the Saiyan Saga to the Cell Saga, and it really only focused on playing as a good guy, so obviously Future Gohan would be a priority there. But I think he could definitely make it as a DLC character. I think he'd be likely there. I just don't think he's going to make the base roster. Even though I do think this roster is going to be bigger than, like, say, Fighterz base roster, I still don't know if he's going to make it, especially with Super in the mix now. And in regards to him having the one arm, I mean, obviously that would be ideal. However, I don't really care as long as he's only fighting with one arm. I understand the reason they don't do it a lot is because of censorship in Japan. I don't really care. It's his fighting style that I just like more. So I think as long as he's like kicking more and only using one arm, it's like I don't really care.
Number 4.
Now's your chance to run, wretched Earthling.
So Cooler has always been one of my favorite villains. I always like him more than Frieza. And honestly, I don't really need his first form. Meta Cooler is cool, but I always usually play as the final form. It's always one of my mains in these games. It was my main in Fighterz. It was my main in Budokai, probably my main in Budokai Tenkaichi. I didn't wind up using him in Xenoverse 2 that much, despite being really excited for him. Just because his moveset was just kind of blah, honestly. But I'm sure Tenkaichi will kind of do better with that, because I think one of the reasons I didn't like him in Xenoverse is I think he didn't have like maximum charge, and like that was one annoying thing with Xenoverse, is that not every character had a charge or would have the best charge. And I think his special moves were just kind of awkward, but I think Raging Blast and Tenkaichi did a pretty good job with it, so I'm not worried there. Now, what are his chances? I think they're pretty good. Next to Broly, he's usually the next in line movie character. And now that we have a newer, more relevant, more popular version of Broly, that version might be a priority over the original Broly, which might kind of null that the original Broly's chances and maybe help Cooler. I'm not sure that's how it's going to work, honestly. I'm just theorizing.
Finished already? Where's all that bravado? Cooler! Win!
Number 3.
Let's start the fight, shall we?
Nova Shenron is one of my favorite GT characters, and he was one of the characters I wanted most in Tenkaichi 3 back in the day, and I was super excited to see him. As a matter of fact, I think he was announced with Future Gohan and like GT Kid Goku, I think. I just like the idea of a Dragon Ball Z character kind of focusing on a particular element, because I don't really think that happens in Dragon Ball. Usually it's just they just shoot generic energy, but Nova actually focuses on a particular element. And it is cool how he sort of starts as a villain, but then does turn into a good guy. And it is interesting how he turned into that, because he is the 4-star Dragon Ball, which I believe Goku's grandpa, like, I know he gave it to him, or his spirit's in it, or something like that. I didn't really watch much of the original Dragon Ball, I'm sorry. But I know that. And that was a really cool idea with Nova, and he became kind of this more noble warrior. And I just always really like his movesets. Admittedly, Tenkaichi 3, I didn't love his moveset that much. I settled for it because it was the first time I got to play as Nova. I think Xenoverse did a much better job, and I'm sure Fighterz would have done great if they actually added him. Which is another reason I just want him in this, because it's like I feel like I haven't, last time I got him was, he was he was an early DLC character in the first Xenoverse, I remember, funnily enough. But it feels like a while since I've gotten him. I'd like to see him in a new game. I'd like to maybe see them do his moveset a bit better than they did in Tenkaichi 3 now. For his chances, I mean, I'm sure there might be some GT characters. Unfortunately, I kind of think he's probably more likely as DLC. And that's, again, if GT's in the base game at all. I am inclined to think GT will be in the game, because in the teaser, the characters that you show in the old Tenkaichi, they do show a little bit of Super Saiyan 4 Goku. I feel like they wouldn't include a GT character, even though it is just a new form of, or not new, but a GT form of Goku. I feel like they wouldn't have included that if GT is not going to be in the new game that they're teasing.
Number 2.
This one's really a no-brainer. If you know me, Janemba's like my favorite character in all of Dragon Ball, so obviously he's going to be on this list. He's obviously going to be one of my mains. I think Tenkaichi was the first time I could play as him, funnily enough, so I think, he should definitely come back. And, his moveset was alright. It wasn't, I think the best Janemba moveset, but it was definitely serviceable enough. It definitely got the point across, and I can't really think of anything else to say. He's my favorite character. Boom, enough said. There's a reason he's not number 1, and I'm going to get to that. As for his chances, I guess around what Cooler had, maybe a little worse. Again, I think he's at least going to be a DLC character. At the very least going to be a DLC character.
Janemba! Win!
Honorable mentions.
So here's a couple of honorable mentions. Tambourine, he's a character I actually like playing as from the original Dragon Ball. Devilman, basically the same as Tambourine. Bardock, Bardock's one of my favorite characters. The only reason he's honorable mention is because I'm pretty confident he's going to be in, and because there's other later forms I like of him more that were not in Tenkaichi. King Vegeta, kind of the same reasons as King Cold. I just like the idea of actually being able to play as him. And I should say I actually prefer his Dragon Ball Z design of him and King Cold, and I liked his ultimate as well. I don't think he has much of a chance, though.
Number 1.
Come at me now.
It was always kind of a toss-up of who's my favorite, Janemba or Super 17. I think I have a slight preference towards Janemba. The main reason Super 17 is on this list is honestly just because I didn't get him in Fighterz. I got Janemba in Fighterz, but I didn't get Super 17, unfortunately. I got Android 17 from Dragon Ball Super, but I didn't get Super 17. But Super 17 I just always thought was really cool. It's just it's so criminal that he had such a short arc in Dragon Ball GT, as it was probably my overall favorite arc for the most part. I know a lot of people aren't super crazy about this character and just prefer original Super 17 or Dragon Ball Super 17. But I still just think this version of him is really cool, and it's really different as well. I love the Gatling gun arm, shocking death ball. I just like his fighting style and his kind of more evil personality. I know his design's kind of weird. It's very 90s, I know, but I don't know. I just like it. I just really dig it. And again, just like Janemba, this was the first time I was able to play Super 17. It was the very first Tenkaichi. So obviously it would be great to see him back. Now as for his chances, I mean, he made the base roster of Xenoverse, but again, Dragon Ball Super was not a factor back then. And Dimps seems to like prioritizing GT. While Spike, not so much. I mean, he sort of did, but I think he could be in the base roster. You know what? No, I think if they are representing GT, he's usually a prime character. He is usually very likely. It's just if they have like more than 3 characters, usually he's very likely. I think at worst he'll be DLC. I think he will make it in the game. It's just could go either way, really. So yeah, that's really all I got for my list. I know a lot of these are really wacky characters, but I tend to like the more obscure, less canon characters. Not to mention, it's like we have a solid idea of who's already making it. So it's like I'm not gonna waste my time on someone like Cell or like Ultimate Gohan or like Kid Boost, characters like that who I'm pretty confident are gonna be in the game anyway. And obviously, like I said, I'm gonna be doing a list talking about characters I think that I would like from Dragon Ball Super, and maybe characters that weren't in Tenkaichi but were in other Spike games, or at least were around during that time and just didn't make it in any of them. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what characters you would like to see in the game, what you think about my list, what characters you wouldn't want to see in the game, what your opinion on what the roster size will be, which I might make a separate video for. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you like it, dislike if you dislike it. Definitely consider subscribing if you like this video and some of my others. It would really help the channel out a lot. Feel free to check out my Patreon as well as my Discord in the comments below. But regardless, thank you so much for checking out this video. I'm definitely looking forward to making more videos about the new Tenkaichi game in the future. But as I always say, another time, another place. Keep being awesome.